Good morning. Thank you for joining me for my daily Come Follow Me study of the Book of Mormon. Today is Friday the 19th. Friday! And we are going to start with the daily reflection on the Book of Mormon. Behold, I ask of you, my brethren of the church, have ye spiritually been born of God? Have ye received his image in your countenances? Have ye experienced this mighty change in your hearts? Alma chapter 5, verse 14. Alma taught the Zoramites that every seed bringeth forth unto its own likeness. Those who have been born again, who have become the sons and daughters of Jesus Christ by adoption, take upon them the family name and are expected to bear that name with fidelity and devotion. In addition, they begin to acquire the Christ-like attributes that characterize the Father of their salvation. They bear the image of the Son of God. Those whose hearts have been changed by the Master not only begin to emulate their Master, but to reflect the character and benevolence and divine love that entice others to greater righteousness. Okay, today is our first general conference talk on obedience. Oh, sorry. Small acts lead to great consequences, by Gordon B. Hinckley, 1984. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. So I believe he's the last speaker in the conference. And he says, now we are ready to return to our homes. We have been counseled by the brethren and have been strengthened in our faith. As we are about to separate, I should like to emphasize the importance of watching the little things in our lives. Have you ever noticed a large gate at a farm fence? As you open it or close it, there appears to be very little movement at the hinge, but there is great movement at the perimeter. Sorry. He's talking about small acts of kindness can grow into mammoth good institutions. It is so likewise with evil things. Small acts of dishonesty, small acts of immoral nature, small outbursts of anger can grow into great and terrible things. And then he gets into the bulk of his talk. Hang on. Sometimes it's just a little too tight. Okay. He talks about how, I think they're in the tabernacle, because it's 1984. So he's talking about how once, right where they stood, was a Bowery. And in September of 1857, on a Sunday afternoon, President Brigham Young was holding a meeting, and he introduced to the congregation a man who appeared to be old and infirm and weary of life. President Young said, "This is Thomas B. Marsh, formerly the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He has now come to us after an absence of nearly 19 years. He is on the stand today and wishes to make a few remarks to the congregation." He says that he came to his office and begged him to be forgiven. Can I be reconciled with you? Can I be reconciled with the church? President Young says, he is here, and I want him to say what he may wish to. Brethren and sisters, I now introduce to you Brother Thomas B. Marsh. So he got up to the pulpit, and, well, I'll just read this. Brother Marsh rose to the pulpit, this man who was named the first president of the Council of the 12 Apostles, and to whom the Lord had spoken so marvelous a manner, as recorded in section 112 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which I wish you would read, said to the people, okay, here's what he says. I do not know that I can make all this vast congregation hear and understand me. My voice never was very strong, but it has been very much weakened of late years by the afflicting rod of Jehovah. He loved me too much to let me go without whipping. I have seen the hand of the Lord in the chastisement which I have received. I have seen and known that it has proved he loved me. For if he had not cared anything about me, he would not have taken me by the arm and given me such a shaking. Is that how we look at our trials? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh, I know the Lord loves me because he's whipping me back into obedience, back into aligning my will with his. Now, he goes on to say, if there are any among this people who should ever apostatize, and do as I have done, prepare your backs for a good whipping, if you are such as the Lord loves. But if you will take my advice, you will stand by the authorities. But if you go away and the Lord loves you as much as he did me, he will whip you back again. Many have said to me that, how is it that a man like you, who understood so much of the revelations of God as recorded in the book of Doctrine and Covenants, should fall away? I told them not to feel too secure, but to take heed lest they also should fall, for I had no scruples in my head as to the possibility of men falling away. I can say in reference to the Quorum of the 12, to which I belonged, that I did not consider myself a whit behind any of them, and I suppose that others had the same opinion. But let no one feel too secure, for before you think of it, your step will slide. You will not then think nor feel for a moment as you did before you lost the Spirit of Christ. For when men apostatize, they are left to grovel in the dark. Okay, Thomas B. Marsh. He left the church. I'm sure many of you know this, but Gordon B. Hinckley goes on to relate the story of Thomas B. Marsh's apostatizing through the story of George A. Smith. It's about a pint of cream. So Thomas B. Marsh's wife and somebody else, Mrs. Harris, they agreed to make some cheese. They were going to make really great cheese together. So when they milked the cow, they were going to save the cream and the strippings together. And they were going to combine them, and they were going to make this great cheese. Well, Mrs. Marsh, she sent off the cream, but she kept the strippings for herself, a pint. And Miss Harris was like, excuse me, we agreed to do this. And so they took it to the bishop, and the bishop was like, yeah, Mrs. Marsh, you did wrong. And Thomas B. Marsh, he stood by his wife. He was like, no, my wife's character is, here I am, Quorum of the 12 Apostles, my wife can't be treated like this type thing. They took it to the High Council, and they concurred the same thing. And then they took it to the First Presidency, and they concurred the same thing. This little affair kicked up a considerable breeze, and Thomas B. Marsh then declared that he would sustain the character of his wife even if he had to go to hell for it. So that's the hill he decided to die on. Because of this, then president of the 12 apostles, the man who should have been first to do justice and cause reparation to be made for wrong committed by a member of the family, took that position. And what next? He went before a magistrate and swore that the Mormons were hostile towards the state of Missouri. That affidavit brought from the government of Missouri an exterminating order which drove more than 15,000 saints from their homes and habitations, and some thousands perished through suffering and exposure consequent of the state of affairs. What a very small and trivial thing, a little cream over which two women quarreled, but it led to, or at least was a factor in, Governor Boggs's cruel exterminating order, which drove the saints from the state of Missouri with all of the terrible suffering and consequent death that followed. The man who should have settled this quarrel, but who rather pursued it, troubling the officers of the court right up to the presidency, literally went through hell for it. He lost his standing in the church. He lost his testimony of the gospel. For 19 years he walked in poverty and darkness and bitterness, experiencing illness and loneliness. He grew old before his time. Finally, like the prodigal son in the parable of the Savior, he recognized his foolishness and painfully made his way to this valley and asked Brigham Young to forgive him and permit his rebaptism into the church. He had been the first president of the Council of the 12, loved, respected, and honored in the days of Kirtland and the early days of Far West. Now he asked only that he might be ordained a deacon and become a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. Oh, right? Oh, for a pint of cream. I know you're like, oh, it's just a pint of cream. Why would you do this for a pint of cream? But it was his wife, you know. All right. We have all seen cases somewhat similar in our own time. I mention the matter only as a reminder to each of us that we leave this great and inspirational conference. We go with resolution in our hearts to live the gospel, to be faithful and true, to have the strength to look above small things that could lead to argument and trouble, to be forgiving one to another, and to look to God and live. It is so easy to stumble. It is sometimes so hard to keep our voices low when small things provoke us. Let us rather remember always that we are sons and daughters of God, children born with a divine birthright, partakers of the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ, the beneficiaries of the priesthood restored by the Almighty for the blessing of his sons and daughters. Let us, my brethren and sisters, walk with integrity and honesty in all our dealings one with another. Let us subdue any arrogance or pride and walk humbly before God and with appreciation and respect for all with whom we associate. And then he ends his talk, but I'm just like, oh my goodness. You're like, okay, well, how does this have to do with obedience? Basically, if one, Mrs. Marsh just would have been obedient to the covenant she made with Mrs. Harris, there wouldn't have been this problem to begin with. And then if they just would have been obedient to the ruling of the bishop, it wouldn't have gone any farther. Even then, if they would have been obedient to the High Council or the First Presidency, none of this would have happened. But it's here for us in the history as a lesson to be learned that by our small acts of obedience, there can be our small acts of disobedience or our small acts of obedience, there can be great consequences, whether for good or for bad. I think my favorite part the part that hit me the most was, he loved me too much to let me go without whipping. That, if that doesn't, I don't know what the words are, but for your Heavenly Father to love you so much that he whips you, like, that's a something. You know, that's a something. Yeah, that's the thing that hit me the most on that. Okay. I don't have any more thoughts on this. So we can do our daily reading on prayer. #201. Robert L. Millett briars and roadblocks. Surely no roadblock could be more prevalent than distraction and preoccupation. Sometimes we don't pray well because our minds and hearts are focused on other things. We are too prone to think of prayer as something within the spiritual realm and of religious realm and of religion as just another department of life. Communion with the infinite requires discipline, and discipline requires making priorities. Obviously, we need to chase wickedness out of our lives if we are to draw close to God in prayer. But in addition, when it is time to pray, we must put aside the things of the world, even good things, in order to engage the greatest good. Another roadblock to an effective prayer life is duplicity, or trying to lead two lives. James explained that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Thus, we would suppose that a person who is worldly throughout the day would have great difficulty praying intently at night. Elder Howard W. Hunter observed, Henry Ward Beecher once said, "It is not well for a man to pray cream and live skim milk." That was a century ago. There is now before us a danger that many may pray skim milk and live that not at all. Just as our lives are only as good as our prayers, so our prayers are only as good as our lives. That is, the more faithful we become in keeping the Lord's commandments and putting first things first in our lives, the more we open the doors of communication with the heavens, and the more comfortable we feel with holy things and holy beings. That's a good one. I like that one. Pray cream and live skim milk. But then he said, pray skim milk and live nothing. That's it. That's kind of like an ouch moment. Because sometimes I feel like I pray skim milk, but I'm definitely not living nothing, but I'm definitely not living cream, okay? Yesterday I was a little angry with most all of the customers. They were all getting on my nerves. Okay. I didn't read the book last night because I read the talk, because you can't listen to it. And I usually listen to it in the morning as I'm waking up, but it doesn't have audio, so I read it last night instead of the book. So, that was Small Acts Lead to Great Consequences by Gordon B. Hinckley, April 1984. And tomorrow, we do Live in Obedience, Joseph B. Wirthlin, 1994. Let's find that one. I should be like out on my walk, you know. Joseph B. Nope. If you don't type it exactly the way it's in there, it just doesn't take. Okay, 1994. Live in Obedience. Okay. We're going to bookmark that. And, okay. All right. Joseph B. Wirthlin, April 1994, Live in Obedience. That's what we're going to do for tomorrow. Let's end it with a Read It, Do It. It's the 19th. All right. Alma chapter 30, verses 53 through 60. They highlight verse 55. Korihor went about leading away the hearts of the people from God. Could you do the opposite? Lead hearts to God. Not my favorite, but you know, they can't all be winners, you know. That's what I learned when I do my own things. Like, they're not all winners. Okay? Alrighty. That's all. We'll see you later. Bye.